What's up, cool people? I'm Matt Conroy, back at you with more Bible reading and trying to accelerate the pace at which I, record these and put them out there. So, we're jumping into Genesis chapter 16 today. Chapter 15 was basically a whole bunch of God confirming his promises with Abram by words and one particular kind of odd deed, you could say. But anyway, so Abram's kind of been waiting on a son because God's saying, hey, you're going to have a lot of descendants. Well, can't really happen if you don't have descendant number one. So that's what we're getting into here with chapter 16. Starting with verse 1. Now Sarai, Abram's wife, had not been able to bear children for him, but she had an Egyptian servant named Hagar. So Sarai said to Abram, "The Lord has prevented me from having children. Go and sleep with my servant. Perhaps I can have children through her." And Abram agreed with Sarai's proposal. So Sarai, Abram's wife, took Hagar, the Egyptian servant, and gave her to Abram as a wife. This happened 10 years after Abram had settled in the land of Canaan. Okay, so Sarai is like, all right, I know you want a son. I have not been able to give you one, and it seems I might not ever be able to give you one. So maybe you're meant to have a son a different way with someone else. I mean, at that time and in that culture, servants were kind of viewed a little more like property than like people. So it would have been, the thought would have been something more like, oh, well, I'm essentially giving you a child just through someone else. Almost more akin to having a surrogate. So, I'm thinking that was the primary thought process here. But in any case, I'm noting the whole 10 years after Abram settled in Canaan. Was that after the initial settlement in Canaan, or was that the post-Egypt settlement in Canaan? Like, this is where, there's a little wiggle room with timeline stuff. But anyway, verse number 4. So Abram had sexual relations with Hagar, and she became pregnant. But when Hagar knew she was pregnant, she began to treat her mistress Sarai with contempt. Then Sarai said to Abram, "This is all your fault. I put my servant into your arms, but now that she's pregnant, she treats me with contempt. The Lord will show who's wrong, you or me." Okay, so would like to know a little bit about, why Hagar had contempt at that point. Because, I mean, was it more just because of the fact that she was kind of sort of forced into it? Maybe. That makes some sense. But why would it be contempt with Sarai and not with Abram? If that's the case, I don't know. But people are generally hard to understand. Good luck trying to know everyone's motivations for most of what they do. So, anyway, verse 6. Abram replied, "Look, she is your servant, so deal with her as you see fit." Then Sarai treated Hagar so harshly that she finally ran away. The angel of the Lord found Hagar beside a spring of water in the wilderness, along the road to Shur. The angel said to her, "Hagar, Sarai's servant, Where have you come from, and where are you going?" "I'm running away from my mistress Sarai," she replied. So Abram's like, "Fine, you got a problem with her? I mean, she's your servant. You go ahead and figure it out." And then, as it says, Sarai treats Hagar harshly to the point where Hagar just can't bear it anymore and runs away. So we'll continue here with what's going to happen to Hagar. Verse 9. "The angel of the Lord said to her, 'Return to your mistress and submit to her authority.' Then he added, 'I will give you more descendants than you can count.'" So Angel's basically saying, "Look, go back. You're going through this for a reason. Just bear with it. And as a reward, or maybe not as a reward, but like, hey, if it makes you feel better, you're also going to have a lot of descendants." All right, verse 11. "And the angel also said, 'You are now pregnant and will give birth to a son. You are to name him Ishmael, which means God hears, for the Lord has heard your cry of distress. This son of yours will be a wild man, as untamed as a wild donkey. He will raise his fist against everyone, and everyone will be against him. Yes, he will live in open hostility against all his relatives.'" So that part would sound a little less hopeful, but still the fact that, the angel's kind of reassuring her, saying, "Look, there's a plan here. Your son is going to be your son's going to be noteworthy," is probably the more positive way to put it. But anyway, I'll explain more thoughts once I get a little later in this. Verse 13. "Thereafter, Hagar used another name to refer to the Lord who had spoken to her. She said, 'You are the God who sees me.' She also said, 'Have I truly seen the one who sees me?' So that well was named Beer Lahai Roy, which means well of the living one who sees me. It can still be found between Kadesh and Bered. So Hagar gave Abram a son, and Abram named him Ishmael. Abram was 86 years old when Ishmael was born." So that's one thing that I kind of got into a little bit a couple of chapters ago, in terms of like God kind of having different names, or at least titles that people use for him. So El is the Hebrew for God, and El Roy, to my understanding, it would translate to the God who sees. So I guess the Lahai part of that is the living one. But anyway, there are many different, El Roy, plenty of other things that God is eventually, referred to by various people throughout the Bible. But I mean, in here, it even says like she used another name. That's why these are generally thought of as, names for God instead of just like mere titles. But anyway, so Hagar did eventually go back, and she gave birth to Ishmael, who, as I understand it, or at least was told at one point, is like the ultimate, like, not ultimate, but like the kind of original starting point of much of Islam. I don't know. I can't necessarily speak to the truthfulness of that claim, but that's something I heard at one point. I mean, obviously the religion of Islam kind of started, with the Prophet Muhammad and all that, but like those people were there beforehand. I don't know. Anyway, point is, so Hagar has a son named Ishmael, and, hey, Abram's got a son now. And since he was promised many descendants, and now Hagar has been promised many descendants, I'm wondering if there might have been like some kind of thought process, or I don't know, some kind of idea between the two of them that, hey, maybe this is the son that God promised. Maybe this is the start of all these descendants that have been promised now to the both of us. But we'll find out eventually that's not quite the case, but because that the kind of reputation that God says Ishmael will have isn't generally the kind of reputation that, God, gives as like a really favorable promise. I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't say that exactly, but still, the people that were generally viewed as God's chosen were people who were not supposed to be in conflict so much, especially not against their own relatives. But I think that description about the tension with relatives kind of maybe hints a little bit at Ishmael and his descendants having conflict with other descendants of Abram, but we'll get there when we get there. I'm trying to, make some connections to what's going on later in the Bible without getting too much into it. Because, then if I go too far, I've gone through the entire Bible, or trying to give, explanations for things throughout the entire Bible, and we don't have time for that in every single one of these videos. But, so Hagar, despite running away at first, eventually comes back. It doesn't say that she was necessarily treated any better by Sarai, but, she does give birth to a son, to Abram's son, and at the very least, Abram himself would likely at least have some favor on Hagar because of that. In any case, Ishmael isn't necessarily mentioned a ton later on in the Bible. So, I mean, I guess, the need to point out that occurrence was kind of the thought that I mentioned before, that maybe Abram and Hagar both had at this point, where they might have thought, oh, all right, this must be the son that God promised. We'll find out later that that's not quite the case, but let me save that for when we get there. Anyway, so that does it for this chapter, actually. Kind of a short one. Oh well. Makes it easier to keep pumping these out. So, that's going to do it for now. I don't really have too many additional thoughts to share with that. I don't know if every chapter of the Bible necessarily needs to have like some, modern, applicable moral lesson kind of thing to it. Sometimes it's just, hey, here's what happened to God's people. So anyway, yeah, as always, like and share if you enjoyed the video, subscribe and click the bell to get updates when I post new stuff. Look down in the description for info on other social media pages, and leave comments down below all that with any thoughts you have. So that's going to do it for now. I hope you're all doing well. Hopefully I'll see you next time for the next chapter. But until then, stay cool, people.